I am here with Reed alum Alex Walker, and we brought Alex here today. Alex has a really interesting story in terms of his experience at Reed and how he got to where he is today. To start off with, why don't you tell people what you do?
Yeah, I work as a lawyer at the law firm Morrison Foerster. I'm a fourth-year associate, so I've been practicing for about 4 years, and I practice real estate law. So that means I help people, buy, sell, lease, finance real estate, mostly, sort of commercial real estate at larger scales, because we're a large law firm that charges high rates. So, it doesn't make a lot of sense to use us for, a single house or something like that. And then we also help, actually close the sale. Usually our clients want to actually do these deals, and so we want to actually, help them do the deal rather than find out a reason, why they shouldn't do it or make everyone's lives hard. So one of the things I like about, being a lawyer does transactional law as opposed to a litigator, who actually fights with other lawyers in court, is at the end of a transaction, everyone's happy. And, so I just closed a refinancing transaction, and, the client sent me a nice note saying, thank you for your work on this. And I exchanged nice notes with the lender's lawyers saying it was great working with you. So that's, yeah.
So there's actually a personal relationship you're developing with the clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the other side too. I mean, often you'll be working against the same lawyers in multiple deals.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You can't be too much of a jerk to them because
you're going to see them again.
Something from them. And, it's much better to have a positive relationship with them. Yeah.
I've heard that before, and I had not thought about law, requiring some of this congeniality. Did that surprise you? Was that unexpected?
To some extent. I mean, in law school, they just teach you really kind of the skills of how to analyze legal issues and sort of look at everything through that particular lens. But when you actually graduate law school and have to practice, a lot of what you have to pick up is sort of the soft skills of like, how do you talk to, the client or the other side or the more senior lawyers you're working with, and when do you take an issue to, the more senior lawyers or just respond back to the other side, and what sort of tone do you want to take in each of those situations? So,
certainly. Yeah. So let me ask you this. So if we're to sort of dig back and draw upon your liberal arts education, when people think of a job, there's so many more components of this position that they had not thought about. And you get into it and some people are surprised, but when we talk about liberal arts, we talk about preparing you for like, the random list of things you get once you actually start in that industry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing that I think, I appreciated about my education at Reed was that, you have to develop really good relationships with your fellow students and with other professors, because it's a relatively small and, class environment. And, most of the major programs aren't all that big. So, you're going to be in conference with people that you'll see again and again. And it's important not to be a jerk. And
right.
You'll see them in multiple contexts and yeah.
And you're having critical discussions, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I was a history major. And one of the things that I liked about that too is just sort of, delving through huge amounts of, old documents and sort of trying to make sense of them and just kind of trying to absorb as much volume as you can and still kind of, have something useful to say about it at the end of the day. And that's definitely useful in the law too. And because you often have large amounts of documents that you can't sort of read, super in depth. You have to be able to sort of read them both in depth and at a high level at the same time.
You're the second history major to say that exact same thing in almost 24 hours. The fact that history has put you in a position to consume and understand complex material, synthesize it, and turn it into something that's meaningful. Tell me where you went to high school. Tell me about your college search, how you ended up at Reed.
So I was actually homeschooled mostly before I came to Reed. When I hit high school, I started taking some community college classes in Sonoma County, California, where I grew up. And I also took some correspondence classes. And then my senior year of high school, I did a year abroad in France through AFS, American Field Service. And I lived with a host family there, and I went to French high school full time.
Did you do everything from a distance, like even like compose your list of places you were going to apply?
No, I looked at places to apply before I went to France.
Okay.
And actually, I applied to Reed early decision and got in. So Reed was the only place that I had to apply to.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And how did you know it was? How did you know that was it?
I'd heard a lot of really good things about it. I knew a couple of folks who graduated from Reed a few years ahead of me, and talked with them about it. It's a connection that my dad made. And I visited campus before I went to France. And
did you know you wanted to major in history? And did you know that you had intended to go to law school?
I think I started telling people when I was like 12 that I was going to be a lawyer when I grew up, which is kind of silly, because when you're a 12-year-old, you have no idea what it is.
Know thyself, right? Look at where you are today. You're like, yeah. I knew where I was headed.
Yeah, well, my grandpa was a lawyer, and I had sort of like a sense that, like, that was a cool thing you could do, and it was sort of involved a lot of thinking and kind of reading and research. And yeah, I've been very happy with it. I'm glad that I went to law school and do this path. So I originally thought I was going to be an English major, actually. And then I found that I took a history class. I really loved it. I took some English classes. I liked them all right, but just nowhere near as much as the history classes. I just really liked that. That history doesn't have sort of a dogmatic theoretical approach to things at all. It's really much more just about learning what happened in the past and trying to make sense of it.
High school students are really curious about, like, so how do you get to a major to the first day you're walking into law school?
I would say I really benefited a lot from taking a couple years between college and law school. And I would definitely encourage people to do the same thing. I think it's you can do a fair amount just with a bachelor's degree, and there are a lot of jobs that are sort of adjacent to law, like being a paralegal or a legal secretary, or where I was at a policy analysis shop where a bunch of the people had JDs. I think only one of them was still practicing, but that gave me the opportunity to actually do a little bit of legal research at that job and see a lot of lawyers working together and the sorts of issues that they worked on. So I would say that's maybe even more important than which exact major you choose, is sort of getting a little bit of experience and getting working with lawyers, even if you're not a lawyer yourself, or even if you're not directly involved in their work.
But it sounds like part of it with Noah, who's currently the pre-law advisor. You talked about your pre-law career, and she sort of moved you into this experience for those 2 years. Are you talking to Noah just casually, or did she know that you were headed this way? She wasn't your advisor. How do you connect with her, and how do you end up doing that right after graduation?
She was a really helpful mentor for me in general. She helped me get my summer job between my junior and senior years, and I took a couple of classes with her, and she was just really good at making herself available to students and talking with them about what they're interested in. And I applied to law school as a senior at Reed, and I got into to UC Berkeley. And I was thinking about doing that, but I had also interviewed at Public Power Council, and they, gave me the pitch of why I should, go work for them and instead of going straight to law school. And I bought it, and I was very glad that I did.
Really?
Yeah.
So their pitch was not only successful, but they were right.
Yeah, they were right. I would recommend other people do the same.
Gosh. And that's hard. I mean, that's hard when you've gotten into this law school. you know, you're going to be competitive, and someone's saying, no, get some life experience. You're like, really? This is, you know, like, how do you make that call?
What I realized is I wanted to have some time not being a student in between, and sort of see how that, you know, how that changed how I thought and what my priorities were. And I think that helped a lot. I think, you know, when you go to law school, there's sort of a natural kind of path to follow, that sort of, you know, do the most prestigious things and sort of compete with all the, you know, most ambitious people. And I think, you know, not having been in school for a couple of years before law school, I felt like I had a little bit better perspective on that, and was better able to sort of see, you know, how can I make this work for me rather than me working for the law school.
You had developed a sense of self-awareness, and it's something that I've heard from your classmates and other classmates from Reed is, you know, being well positioned to think about what's right for you right then. If you thought back to your Reed perspective, how do so many people walk away with that sense of what's valuable for them?
I appreciated that that at Reed I was really able to challenge myself in the ways that I wanted to challenge myself in, and that really helped me learn more about myself. I would say that that I was able to take on really big projects and do them. And working through my thesis at Reed was sort of, you know, as a senior was definitely one of the big parts of that, sort of the biggest challenge I'd ever faced as a student. And I really enjoyed it. And I felt like it helped me learn, you know, what sort of things I enjoy and, you know, what goals make sense for me. You know, everyone kind of wants to, you know, do the best they can and sort of impress their peers. And since you have a whole year to do it, you can, you know, easily bite off way more than you can chew. And you've sort of worked up to it because, you know, like at least in the history program, we had the junior seminars where you write a pretty long paper and do a lot of research to support it. So it gives you you know, some of the tools to approach something really big and sort of have a sense of how that would work.
Can you talk about what skills you drew upon in law school that helped support your success and your completion there? And first, where did you end up going to law school?
So I went to NYU in New York.
Okay, so you totally switched it up.
Yeah, so I did a broader search and you know, applied to maybe like 10 law schools. I'd only applied to Berkeley and Stanford when I was a Reedy. But after you know, a year and a half out of Reed, I applied to maybe 10 schools on the East Coast and West Coast. Got into NYU, and I visited it along with other law schools on the East Coast, and I really liked it. I felt like the students were just really engaged with their classes, which was something that reminded me of Reed. There was also a Reedy I knew who was a student there at the time, who helped show me around a little bit. Reed set me up really well to do work in law school. I felt like law school was you know, was tough but definitely doable. But I noticed a lot of my peers just felt like law school was like way tougher than what they'd done in undergrad. So so I felt lucky in that way that, you know, Reed had been challenging enough and sort of let me challenge myself enough that that law school didn't feel, you know, all that overwhelming or difficult by comparison. I mean, there's definitely a large volume of reading that you have to do for law school, and you have to read somewhat closely, but I felt like, you know, all the classes I'd done set me up pretty well to be able to handle that amount of reading and sort of, you know, take good notes on what I'd read and sort of process it. I also felt like all the conference discussions at Reed set me up pretty well for the style of teaching that most law professors have, which is very interactive. You know, they'll ask a relatively open-ended question and sort of expect people to have a intelligent response that they can defend. it's definitely a little more, it can definitely be a little more like adversarial than a lot of Reed seminars, which tend to be a little bit more just kind of, collaborative, but still, in depth and at a high level. But having to speak often in class at Reed really helped prepare me pretty well for being able to speak in a more intimidating setting in law school. I also learned, that when I need to, I can really buckle down and grind out a lot of tough work when it's getting close to showtime, because in law school, exams are really important, and you sort of have to, have a large amount of knowledge, kind of at the front of your memory when you go into exams. And so people, will kind of drive themselves crazy studying for them and preparing. And I learned at Reed that, if I, when I have a big project to do, I can do it. It'll take some time and some sweat, or maybe that's the wrong term, but just some sort of, mental fortitude. But I feel like I grew that, ability at Reed, and that served me well in law school too.